Go ahead.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining in on your computers and phones and wherever you are. Welcome to the Downtown Action Committee meeting, June 10th, 2020. And do the roll call first, please, and then I'll read the introduction for the components of this virtual public meeting.
Roger Jansen,
Present?
Dick Bahilich,
Present.
Ryan Shakeless,
Present.
Stephen Graham. Let the record reflect that Stephen Graham is not present. Michael Cuevas,
Present.
David Felton. Let the record reflect that David Felton is not present. Brad McPherson. Let the record reflect that Brad McPherson is not present. Johnny Lee DeZon.
Present.
Gregory Gabriel.
Present.
I think Brad McPherson was there.
Yeah, I
Brad?
saw it.
We lost him before the meeting started, though.
Oh, okay.
Hold on. He may have logged
All right.
in. Hold on.
Well, if he pops back in, we'll make note. All right, thanks, Hope.
He's there.
so- Let me proceed then with the statement. Pursuant to the Executive Order 2069 issued by the Office of Governor Ron DeSantis on March 20th, 2020, and Key A. James, Mayor, Executive Order 2025-05 issued on April 2nd, 2020, the City of West Palm Beach's boards and committees are conducting meetings through media technology and have released the requirements to have a quorum of its members physically present at City Hall. On April 14th, 2020, Mayor Key A. James issued Executive Order 2020-09, which specifically provides the rules of procedure for conducting city meetings, including requirements for constitutional hearings. There's the ability for the public to continue to participate in this public hearing. It is being streamed live and available for viewing in the City Commission chambers located at City Center, 401 Clematis Street, on the condition that social distancing be practiced. Additionally, for those wishing to access the meeting remotely, they're able to do so directly through the applicable Zoom webinar link, as well as the city's usual media channels, including WPB-TV 18, the city's website, and the city's YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter feeds. Anyone from the public who would like to provide comment on the agenda and on agenda item is able to do so through the following in the City Center Flagler Gallery, or dialing 561-320-6599 and leaving a voicemail, not to exceed 3 minutes, sending an email or video recording to dacpubliccomment@wpb.org, or completing the online public comment form at www.wpb.org/public comments. Those accessing the meeting directly through Zoom may also use the Q&A or raise hand features. Anyone accessing just the Zoom audio using their phone may raise their hand by pressing *9. Regardless of method, please be sure to indicate the agenda number or case number for which you are providing comment. Everyone providing testimony must have video capability and will need to be sworn in. The swearing will occur at the start of each case on the agenda. If you are about to provide testimony and were not sworn in, please be sure to indicate such and be sworn before offering your testimony. After the applicant presents their case, the staff will provide a presentation, and then the public will have an opportunity to speak or have their comments read in the record from previously received correspondence. The board will then go into executive session. Prior to rendering a decision, the board will confirm no additional public comments have been received by staff. For the members of the board, as emphasized, the Florida sunshine laws are applicable, and you may not use the chat feature or any other form of individual communication to discuss matters with other board members, the applicant, or the general public during the meeting. And I think, Anna Marie, in addition, you said when someone would like to speak up, would you prefer that they state their name first before making comments?
We can see who's speaking. The idea is when it's time for the board members to provide their comments, if you can call them one by one, so it is easier for them to know when they have to, when they can.
All right, good. And I suppose Pledge of Allegiance. Anna Marie, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
No.
No, not doing that?
No.
All right, Rick will do it then.
We'll do it.
All right, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
and justice for all.
Thank you, Rick.
I did that better than Roseanne Barr.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you.
Great backdrop.
Nice touch.
Item two in your packet had minutes from the May 13th meeting. Do any board members have any comments or questions or deletions or corrections? If someone would like to make a motion to approve the minutes from the May 13th meeting,
Motion to approve.
and a second?
Second.
A motion, a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the minutes approved. Item 3, report from City Urban Designer, Ana Maria Aponte.
Yes, good morning. Thank you everybody for attending the meeting. Once again, we're here in the virtual meeting. We hope come back to our regular meeting soon. In the meantime, I think it's working pretty well under the circumstances. This morning, I would like to introduce our new board member, Johnny Lee Dyson. Johnny Lee is joining our meeting, our board, as a first alternate. Johnny Lee lives downtown and has experience in marketing. Johnny Lee, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Like Anna pointed out, I've been living in West Palm Beach for about 3 years, and I've been doing marketing for 12 years, and I'm glad to join you guys. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Welcome to the board.
Yes, welcome. Thank you, John Lee.
That's all I have for today.
Okay, great. So that's item 3, and same with me. I'll skip comments till later in the meeting. So we'll move into item 5 of the agenda, declaration of ex parte communication. Does anyone on the board have any ex parte communication to declare? Starting with Nick?
Nope.
Nope. Brian? Oh, Brian's not with us. Oh, he is here. Brian's here. Sorry, there you are. None. Steven's not here. Michael?
No.
No. David's not here. Brad?
None to declare.
None. John Lee?
None to declare.
Okay. Gregory?
None.
Okay. I received a phone call from Greg Kino on case 2004, but we had no real substantive discussion about the case. Okay. Move into today's public hearing portion. Everybody out there that's watching, I believe you have instructions on how you can participate. If not, somehow contact the numbers that were made available over the webinar information. So we'll start with swearing in of the speakers. That will do that before each case. So we'll move right into the new cases. Our first case today is Downtown Action Committee case number 20-04. Request by Edwin Muller of WGI on behalf of HTG Banyan LLC for DAC approval of special review and 4 variance items. So we move
Let me know when everyone's in the room.
Okay. Stacy, that looks like everybody.
Okay, great. If you intend to speak on this item, please raise your right hand. And do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're going to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. And you guys should have received affidavits from planning staff as well. So if you speak on the item, please fill that out and return it to them.
Okay, thanks. So we'll go ahead and hear the presentation kindly from the applicant.
I just wanted to double check that you guys are able to see the slideshow on the correct screen.
Yes.
Yes. All right, perfect. Thank you. Good morning, DAC members, staff. My name is Edwin Mueller on behalf of WGI. I am presenting for the applicant today on this project called Flagler Station. The applicant is Housing Trust Group. And before we get into the request before you this morning, I wanted to give some moments here at the beginning to Jason Larson, who's on the call. He is with Housing Trust Group, and he can speak a little bit about the group and their work, their history, not only in Palm Beach County, but in South Florida as affordable housing developers. So Jason, if you'd like to jump in here.
Sure. Hi, thank you everyone, and good morning. My name is Jason Larson. I'm Vice President of Development with the developer Housing Trust Group. We're based in Coconut Grove. We're a fully integrated real estate enterprise involved in the investment, development, and management of real estate assets, affordable workforce, and conventional multifamily residential housing. Since our inception in 1997, we have developed more than 6,000 units of multifamily housing We've worked closely with local governments to support their housing goals. We've been working on this particular site since 2008, and the property owners have been gracious enough to allow us to submit these highly competitive 9% federal housing tax credit applications administered by the state for affordable housing funding. And these applications take a lot of time, and there's no guarantee of funding. So these types of affordable housing developments can only happen with public and private partnerships. And we're finally able to pull it off last year with the help of West Palm Beach Community Development, Housing Community Development, providing local government support through the affordable housing incentives, which qualified us to apply for and win almost $24 million in federal funding through the tax credit program. This also allowed us to obtain some additional Palm Beach County funding. The overall development cost of this property is approximately $32.5 million. So just got a slide here and some pictures of some examples of affordable housing we've recently completed. The top right multicolored building is senior housing development that we recently completed in partnership with Riviera Beach Housing Authority on some vacant land that they had. Top left is a development called Courtside, which is in Overtown, was a redevelopment there. And then the bottom left is development down in the Homestead called Princeton Park, which was completed last year. And then bottom right is a senior housing development in downtown Fort Lauderdale. We completed about 5 years ago called Village View. And these were all funded with similar financing that we'll be using on Flagler Station. So if you can go to the next slide. Just to let you know how the affordability works is the property operates under rental caps, and we've got a mixed income here. We've got units at 30% AMI, going up to 80% of the AMI. And it's a little snapshot from our market study. You can see comparing our affordable rents here from a low of $336 for some of the one bedrooms up to about $1,500 for some of the three bedrooms. And then that compared to the market rent, we're about half of what the current market rent is. So the property is very affordable. And then next box below is some of the income limits. You do have to income qualify to live there. You can't make over the limits you've seen there. For the 30% AMI lower rent units, it would be up to a maximum of $30,570. And then for the 80% units up to $81,520. So that's it in a nutshell. We're excited to be involved in this development. Like I say, we've been working on it for almost over 10 years. And being from Palm Beach County myself, I'm looking forward to years from now driving by it as it's completed and kind of knowing that we all had a hand in making it happen. So thanks a lot, and Ed, I'll turn it back over to you.
Good morning again, everyone. This is Edwin. So before you today are the following requests for the project Flagler Station on the northeast corner of Tamarind and Banyan Boulevard. We are obviously, with the nature of the project, we are asking for DAC special review. There are 4 variances that have come kind of as a result of working with the city on the best placement and orientation of the building. Those variances are specific to the minimum setback from Banyan Boulevard, minimum rear setback, the maximum setback along Tamarind Avenue, and the minimum active use liner requirement on the 2nd floor. The final request is a TDR request, a transfer of development rights, as this is within the downtown master plan area. This site is designated as an incentive area for TDRs when you are using one of the incentive programs such as affordable housing, as this project is. In working with the city staff, we are very thankful of the collaboration that has occurred until this point. And we have reached staff recommendation of approval with conditions that we are in agreement with and have worked carefully to craft through the life of this project from its initial inception. Just to begin to contextualize the project for you, we are located on the northeast corner of Tamarind Avenue and Banyan Boulevard. The project site is about 0.76 acres. It's made up of 5 parcels that you see outlined in the yellow. The site is very narrow from north to south, so it is a challenging site to be able to develop on. I don't know if everyone is aware, but this site has been vacant for a very long time. The staff report outlines that at least for over 15 years, this site has been vacant, if not longer. So before you today is really a project that is looking to maximize the hard corner here and provide a development that is an exemplary sort of gateway and transition element into the historic Northwest neighborhood and the downtown. The zoning of the site is the Quadro Business District 3. Like I did mention, we are within the TDR receiving site eligibility area and have that designation with the option to build up to 15 stories with an additional FAR allotment if we so choose. One thing that I wanted to sort of bring to light in the midst of all this is that there are current Banyan improvements being constructed, as you all know, along Banyan to widen the roadway and make it more of a sort of a complete street, a more pedestrian-oriented design. And so this is occurring in the sort of in the midst of us doing this project. One thing I did want to mention is that you'll see in the aerial, there are quite a few black olive trees that are located on site. In working with the city and with our proposed development, we are attempting to mitigate and keep on site as many of the trees and preserve as many of the trees as possible along the street frontage of Banyan Boulevard, but some of the trees will have to be removed and mitigated for with this development. So going into sort of contextualizing the actual project for you guys, we are proposing 94 affordable housing units within an 8-story structure. 70 of those units are going to be micro units, and the remaining 24 will be standard. To sort of create that pedestrian-oriented design and further the mixed-use nature of this project, we do have a little over 3,000 square feet of retail uses on the ground floor and some in the second floor that will allow for that sort of pedestrian walk-up, activate the street frontage, and really establish an inviting corner and gateway for the Northwest neighborhood. We are currently proposing this development at an FAR of 2.7, which is well within the allotment of the incentive designation. And again, this is an 8-story structure, well below the 15 stories that we would be allowed to go through. Just to contextualize some of the inspirations behind the project and working with the city in terms of the architecture, in terms of the aesthetic and the vernacular that we're proposing, we looked at the different elements, architectural elements that are located in the vicinity, notably the Social Security building and some of the water tower features that are to our west and some of the stamped sort of treatments that they have on them, incorporating these archways and the vernacular and aesthetic that occurs in the immediate area, in the immediate vicinity, so that we are proposing a development that is complementary and really contextualized within the immediate area. So in terms of the site and how it functions, our access is being proposed off of Banyan Boulevard. We originally came in with an access that was proposed along Tamarind. In working with the city staff, planning and zoning staff, we decided that it was a better condition to have the entrance, the driveway along Banyan, as to not disturb or create any issues along Tamarind Avenue with that street frontage. In terms of how you access the site, there is being a proposed median in the Banyan Boulevard median. A small median is going to be installed to sort of deter the left in, left out motion, not to, so that we avoid traffic concerns here. So the only motion that is, the only turning movements that are allowed are sort of the right in, right out. Here you begin to see some of the retail spaces that I just mentioned. We have one on the northwest corner. We have a small accessory retail space here. Really inviting lobby and leasing space here with a sort of plaza element. And again, it's 94 units, a little over 3,000 square feet of retail spaces. There's 79 parking spaces being proposed within a two-story, within the first 2 stories of the structure. And we are providing a little over, almost close to 10,000 square feet of private open space, which is above the requirement of 25% required open space for private use. And I wanted to highlight sort of what's happening on the 3rd floor as far as that private open space for the residents. There's a pool deck with a rooftop garden, terraces, an amenity and community room, and so forth. These are some of the elevations, some of the inspirations and material demonstrations that are being proposed with the project. Now, in collaboration with both the city and the CRA, there are 2 parcels immediately to our north that are owned by the CRA. And in working with the CRA and the city, we are trying to really comply and sort of further the policies and objectives of the Rails to Trails initiative. We have come to sort of an agreement with the CRA that we will improve the 2 parcels just to our north to incorporate a linear park design. There's currently a rail, an unused rail through there, and we want to sort of borrow some of the aesthetic that was done with the sort of the High Line, the project over in Jefferson Terminal District with Grandview Public Market, and sort of incorporate a pedestrian linear park on the northern portion of the project. Through this project, there was also a designation in the zoning atlas that showed a proposed extension of Douglas Avenue, which would run immediately east of our project. And sort of to bring up another document from the city, the downtown master plan, the mobility plan rather, they don't show this extension. So a negotiation that we had with the city was we will provide a public right-of-way dedication that has a dedicated pedestrian promenade along the east side, which you're seeing outlined in red here. So really what you begin to see along the north and the east of the property is a pedestrian passageway that is well vegetated, well designed, and well incorporated into the project. So in terms of the actual request, now that we're contextualized with the project, as far as the special review, the DAC special review, staff has analyzed our compliance with all of the criteria and we comply. Staff has determined that the proposed project will serve to enhance this underdeveloped intersection of Tamarind Avenue and Banyan Boulevard, and it serves as an important location for the entry into the downtown and the northwest neighborhood. In terms of the specific variances, the first one is the minimum setback from Banyan Boulevard. The requirement is 16 feet from the existing back of curb, and we are proposing 15, so it's a variation of 1 foot. The minimum rear setback requirement is 5 feet, and we are proposing to be right on the property line. This came as a result of collaboration with city staff on how to best design around Banyan Boulevard and the frontage that we have along Banyan. In addition to on-site stormwater drainage, landscaping, and so on. The third variance that we're requesting is from the maximum setback allowed along Tamarind Avenue. The maximum setback required is 30 feet. That's the maximum that we can be. And we are proposing 34 feet, which is a variation of 4 feet. And the final variance that we're requesting is from the minimum active use liner on the second floor. The requirement is for 60%, and we're proposing 21%. We do have an open lobby that is open up to the second floor with a really engaging sort of corner lobby feature there. And the variance comes from having the parking on the second floor, which is outlined in red there. So in terms of the criteria for the variances, staff has determined, and we are compliant with all the criteria for the variances. Now, finally, is the request for the transfer of development rights. With the acreage, the site acreage as it stands today for the site, we have 33,280 square feet of site area. The FAR allowed right now with the base zoning is the 1.0, which is the site area. And the additional FAR that we would be allowed to go up to with the incentive designation is 3.75, which is this 124,800 square feet that we could potentially go up to. We are only proposing 89,451 square feet, which is a 2.7 FAR, which is a TDR request of 56,171 square feet. Again, we have staff recommendation of approval with conditions for all of the requests presented to you this morning. And with that, I'll take any questions. We have a good representation of the entire development team here that can field any questions you might have on the project.
Okay, thanks, Edwin.
Thank you.
Staff, would you now like to respond to this, or did you have additional information, or would you?
Yeah,
like?
Good morning, Liz Levac, Urban Design Planner. I do have a presentation, although Edwin has shared a lot of the information that I was going to share. So I'm gonna have to skip around a bit, which is fine. So this is the DAC case 2004. Let me okay, so we already went into zoning designations, so I don't need to go over that. Jason did a great job of outlining the breakdown of the units and the percentage of the AMI, so I won't go over that. I just do want to mention that anything below 80% does meet the definition of the city's housing and community development, their definition for what is considered affordable in comparison to workforce. So anything below 80% is affordable. And then the capacity we have already gone over, so I won't repeat that. Just to go over, the affordable housing incentive does come from the zoning regulations, section 94-134. There is a specific incentive for affordable housing that the applicant is requesting. The intent of this is to promote the creation of affordable housing by allowing additional development capacity for projects which include affordable housing units. This incentive is for city-owned TDRs, which is in a separate TDR case, which Edwin has mentioned. It's number 2 on the DAC agenda, and we can briefly go over that when we get to that case number. And the transfer of those TDRs do require city commission approval for the city-owned TDRs. And the city requires 10 years of affordability, and I just wanted to mention that the project is proposing 50 years of affordability at this location. So the site is in a prominent location. I wanted to mention that it's not only at the southwest entrance into the northwest neighborhood, it's also along Banyan Boulevard, which is an eastbound entrance into the downtown major entry corridor into the downtown area. The CRA has vested interest in the property due to its proximity and location to the Northwest neighborhood. And although they don't have any ownership of the subject properties, they do have partial or full ownership of the linear properties that Edwin mentioned to the north, which are shown here in purple. We are under a legal review right now to determine if it's partially city, partially CRA owned. And within that, there is the historic railroad spur that I wanted to show these pictures of, courtesy of Frederick Mittner, historic preservation planner for the city. And the CRA does envision a linear park from Tamarind to Sapodilla along this entire corridor. So not just north adjacent to this project, but the envisioning is that this could continue all the way to Sapodilla. And WGI has presented the conceptual design. I won't go over it again. The railroad spur would be maintained. There would be a proposal for a sign for the Northwest neighborhood. The intent is to get it constructed at the same time. At the time that I wrote the staff report and put this presentation together, there was no exact funding mechanism in place. So it's subject to further review with the CRA and the city and the applicant, but we're hoping that it can get done at the same time. The linear park will require a separate DAC review, so it's not included in this review. And I just wanted to mention that it would be something that would have a separate site plan review and would come forward to you at a later time, so we can talk about more specifics at that time. I really wanted to mention the pedestrian connectivity that Edwin has mentioned, the public plaza along Tamarind Avenue and the Tamarind Banyan Corner. This is not a requirement. The project is not large enough to require the regulation that requires public open space, but the applicant designed this based off the importance of the site into the northwest entrance and into downtown with hardscape and landscape features and public seating, and it's designed with the future tie-in to that linear park in mind. Also, the pedestrian passageway along the eastern facade, it does meet the requirement for the extension of Douglas Avenue. The staff has worked with the applicant on design to include landscape and hardscape. We want to not allow above ground utilities within that. We don't want it to be treated as an alleyway. We really want it to be a pedestrian experience. This will be 15 feet of just a public pedestrian walkway. Again, eventually tying into that linear design. Staff would like to continue to work with the applicant on design. The DAC set of plans had a couple things that staff wants to continue to work with the applicant on, to include a higher variety of landscape. We want to make sure there's sufficient height to screen the adjacent federal parking lot, and this parking lot has a chain link fence that's in pretty rough shape on the federal parking lot. So we want to make sure that this is screened for the benefit of public who are using this, and it'll be a benefit for the developer as well. There was a trench drain and some drainage system that was proposed in there, so we want to work with them to make sure that that's hidden and not something that pedestrians have to experience just walking over the trench drain. And also to better screen the parking garage at the east facade. So shown here is an artificial green wall, which is something that's not permitted within the city. So we want to work with them to incorporate either a live green wall or some other type of landscape bed to screen that, because that's parking garage and the parking ramp right there. Although they did a great job of wrapping the southeastern corner with an actual commercial space. But the continuation we want to make sure is screened. So this just shows all the things that that I just talked about with the linear properties from Tamarind to Sapodilla. Subject properties are in red, and then the proposed future Douglas and Division extensions. So we're only talking about Douglas here. It's shown as a 15-foot pedestrian connection, and that would connect linear properties, but it would also, the future north property would also have to meet that requirement as well. So it would connect Banyan to Second, which would be pedestrian connectivity into the northwest neighborhood. I don't want to repeat the Banyan Boulevard, but it is currently under construction with improved sidewalks, incorporation of bicycle lane, and shade trees. This was reviewed by DAC at the October 10th, 2019 meeting. And the proposed project is coordinating with streetscape design and the construction timeline to make sure that we are timing it together. So as Edwin mentioned, it is a very narrow lot, which does have challenges developed that staff recognizes to fit all the requirements for active use liners, with this requirement for the second and third floor along Banyan, to fit required parking, required setbacks, and also to incorporate the public space along Tamarind that staff and CRA wanted, and to have the required Douglas Avenue pedestrian extension. So with that, the proposal has requested 4 variances. I won't go, I'll go into further detail later about those, but I wanted to talk about the restrictions and how it all ties into what I'll be talking about with the variances and also the special review criteria. So it's staff's job that when we have a project that's coming forward to DAC to review based off special review criteria. So this project was required for special review due to its request for the variances, as well as for utilizing the Affordable Housing Incentive TDRs. And staff did find that the request meets the requirements of Section 9454B2. Part A of this is the relationship of the building to site and surroundings. And although there is a request for the setback variances, staff finds the building is proposed with neighboring properties in mind. The properties to the north, east, and south all permit compatible heights with the use of incentives. The west is the water treatment plant, but this is separated by the Tamarind right-of-way and railroad tracks, so it's pretty separated at that location. And overall, staff feels that the proposed project will benefit an underdeveloped corridor, which currently contains federal surface parking lots. So to the east and to the south are surface parking lots. The subject property is a vacant lot. To the north, there are some vacant lots. So through the introduction of active uses along Banyan and Tamarind, this will be a large upgrade to this site and corridor. Part B of this is circulation and traffic flow. So I'll start with traffic circulation. There was a traffic study, of course, submitted with this project, even though this is within a traffic concurrency exemption area. Something to mention is that the traffic study was based on residential use, but that doesn't necessarily account for less traffic generated by a project being within a downtown, utilizing micro units and affordable housing. Although it's not within the TOD district, it's just south of Clematis is the TOD district, and it's right nearby to a tri-rail station. It's also along a bus route. There is a bus shelter directly adjacent to the site. And all of these factors contribute to less single-use vehicle use for the project. Couple recommendations in terms of traffic circulation. Edwin mentioned the traffic for the driveway entrance needs to be limited to right in, right out only movement. This was from our city traffic engineers, a requirement. That median that Edwin presented on, at my knowledge is that it has not yet been approved by traffic engineering and the internal reviewers at the time of the staff report. So that's something that we are looking at. They still have to review that and approve it, and we're finding the best way to limit those movements without impacting the sidewalk and pedestrian movement. Another thing just to mention, the project will incorporate a staging area for dumpsters and recycling bins for pickup subject to public works reviews. So this needs to be adjacent to the curb on Banyan Boulevard, and that just hasn't been incorporated yet. So something we'll handle through site plan approval. Skipping C for now, I wanted to include D, public realm, in with when I'm talking about the pedestrian circulation because it's very related. So in terms of pedestrian circulation, again, this will be a major improvement with the introduction of active uses at the vacant site. There is only one curb cut proposed. We worked with the applicant. The original proposal had 2 curb cuts, one on Tamarind and one on Banyan, 2 entrances into the parking garage. We not only wanted to limit to 1, but we also wanted to keep the Tamarind as a plaza to have this entrance into the northwest that is a nice aesthetic pedestrian entrance. 8-foot sidewalks around the entire perimeter. There will be public bike racks, and there will be a micromobility station, which is a requirement when you have micro units. And as previously mentioned, with the pedestrian passageway along the east facade and the public plaza on the western facade, there is a lot of pedestrian connectivity at this project. So one recommendation in terms of the pedestrian circulation, we need to find the appropriate placement for the micromobility station on site. Staff is recommending Tamarind Avenue because it is public. It'll be in view of people coming from the Tri-Rail station, and it'll help with that first and last mile to get to the Tri-Rail or the Brightline station. Also, to find an appropriate location to maintain the bus shelter adjacent to sites, we need to work on Comtran and city staff and the applicant. The applicant shall work with staff on the design for the pedestrian passageway, as previously stated, and then suggestion for the incorporation of warning signals for pedestrian bicycles when a car is leaving the parking garage, especially important for bicyclists who will be going pretty fast by this parking garage entrance. So going back to C, building design. The proposed architecture staff feels is a unique blend of historic and modern features. The design respects the surrounding architecture with the incorporation of arches. So it's really interesting. They used some of these reference images. You can see train stations, the concrete arch over this railroad station here. And then this is actually, this is the federal courthouse that's just right nearby on Banyan Boulevard. And they even looked at the shapes of the windows and the train cars and incorporated this into the design. So not only respecting historic architecture, but also respecting the tie-in to the railroad line, which is directly adjacent to this project. The architect incorporated true windows along the second story where the active use liner variance is requested. So shown here in red, those are windows, and that's all parking garage use. So it gives that appearance of active use along that facade. And they continue the design of windows along the ground floor parking garage. So those are ventilation grates shown in red, but it continues the pattern of the windows that are along the other portion, the western portion of Banyan Boulevard, which will make for a nicer facade there. One recommendation, again, that the applicant shall remove the artificial green wall, which is shown here in yellow. So they were proposing that on both the east and south facade. So we'll just work with them on that. Going into variance requests, there are the two setback variance requests, one from Banyan Boulevard, request of 1 foot in the rear property line. We've already seen these images from Edwin, so I won't go into detail about those. But in terms of variances, staff has to review based off the variance criteria, section 9438D6, and we did find them to be met for these two setback variances. Specifically, that a circumstance particular to the land exists and a special condition is not a result of the applicant. That being that it's a very narrow lot, which creates restrictions for meeting all the requirements in an efficient manner. If the project was built to meet the required Banyan Boulevard setback, which is from the existing Banyan Boulevard curb line, not the proposed, and the rear setback, they would not be able to meet the ground floor active use requirement as well. Which staff feels will be more detrimental to the public realm than the request for these variances, resulting in a long facade of just parking garage use, ventilation grates, or even if they used windows, you would just be looking into a parking garage. In regard to the rear setback variance, something I wanted to mention, typically building openings along a 0 foot setback are prohibited. What we've been working with the CRA and our building official is that we will work with our legal department to come up with a type of legal agreement between the CRA and the city, the owners of those linear parcels, to not permit occupied structures on that 34 foot linear parcels. And it would be split, so the 17 would go to the south parcel, 17 would go to the north. So the architect designed the openings based off that 17 foot setback. For when the structure is right on the 0 lot line. And generally, staff supports these variance requests due to the narrow width of site. The 1 foot variance from Banyan Boulevard is minimal and won't negatively affect the public realm. There's still the sufficient sidewalk width there. And the variance from the rear setback, again, also really won't impact the public realm. Staff does recommend, in the case of the linear park is not constructed, that there would be a 5-foot buffer, landscape buffer installed, which would be maintained through maintenance agreement by the developer. The next, the active use liner, which Edwin has already talked about. Staff finds the applicant meets the required variance criteria again, specifically a circumstance peculiar to the land exists and special condition not a result. The lot depth, again, does not permit a parking garage to be built in an efficient manner. If the active use liner was provided on the second floor, they would not be able to fit the tandem parking spaces, which would require an additional floor dedicated to parking. And for only a couple parking spaces, it's not economically, it doesn't make sense for the applicant to do that. And it also adds an extra level of parking, which is something that staff feel would be detrimental to have. And staff generally finds that the architectural design with the incorporation of the windows along the second floor does give it the appearance of the active use liner. And then the last is the setback from Tamarind Avenue. The special condition that is not a result of the applicant is that the variance is directly tied to staff's request for incorporation of a public plaza to create an enhanced public experience. Typically, when you have a requirement for public open space, which the site does not, the maximum setback does not apply. But in this case, since it's not a requirement for public open space, it is something we have to ask for a variance for from the board. And again, all of this is tied directly to improving pedestrian experience and providing public connectivity to the Northwest neighborhood. So overall, staff's professional opinion is that the proposed project will substantially improve an area of the downtown, which currently is vacant and in an undeveloped area in the DMP. And the requested variance will not negatively impact the downtown area and will support the construction of a new project that will benefit the public realm and introduce affordable housing units. So the recommendation regarding the review by Downtown Action Committee, based on findings of fact that special review satisfies all the criteria of Article 2, Section 9452B2, staff recommends approval with the following conditions. A, the project shall obtain City Commission approval for transfer of TDRs associated with affordable housing units incentive. B, prior to issuance of building permit, a legal document must be in place to restrict development on the adjacent 34-foot land. C, in the case the linear park is not constructed, the applicant shall install a 5-foot landscape buffer along the north facade, which would be maintained by maintenance agreement. D, the driveway on Banyan Boulevard shall be restricted to right in, right out turning movements only. E, the applicant shall provide a staging area at the curbside of Banyan Boulevard for dumpster and recycling bins. A drop curb may be required, subject to further review by city staff. F, the applicant shall continue to work with staff on proposal for pedestrian passageway to incorporate wider variety of landscape and hardscape and reduce impact of the fence chain through pedestrian experience. G, the applicant shall incorporate a warning signal for when a vehicle is exiting the driveway to reduce potential impacts between vehicles and pedestrians, bicyclists. H, applicant shall work with city staff to find an appropriate location for micromobility station, recommending placement along Tamarind Avenue. I, applicant shall continue to work with city staff and Comtran to locate an appropriate site and design for the bus shelter, which does currently exist on site. And then lastly, the artificial green wall shall be removed. And staff is recommending approval for the variance request. All 4 variance requests is listed here based on the fact that the request satisfies all criteria of Article 2, Section 9438B6. And thank you. That is all.
Thank you, Liz. Very nice, thorough presentation. I think everything's understood and very clear, so thank you for that. Stacy, do we have any comments from the public that we need to consider now?
Yeah, I believe John's going to read a couple of them into the record.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is John. I received one through chat in Zoom. It's from Mr. Lawrence Gordon, owner of 922 2nd Street. He states, I'm concerned about increased traffic on 2nd Street, which has a number of residences. Lack of a left turn lane on Banyan may force traffic to go around the block on 2nd Street. And that concludes his comment.
Okay, is that the only item so far?
For this case, yes, that is the only comment I've received.
Okay, would staff, Liz, would you like to respond to that for us?
Sure. I mean, the exact method of the limiting turn movements is still being looked at by city traffic engineering, and I'm sure they're keeping in mind what will happen if they limit that movement. I know that they are, and I don't want to speak on behalf of them. I know they are going to maintain a left turn into the federal parking lot. So I'm not sure if they're going to look at some type of alternative that allows for a safer U-turn into that rather than a left turn, or something at Sapodilla. But again, I don't know. I can, if the individual with the concern, I can certainly provide my contact information, which is on the agenda. And once I have more information from the city traffic engineers, I can share that with them as well. And I will definitely share this comment with the traffic engineers as well.
Great. That's what I was going to recommend. So if you do that, that'd be excellent. Thank you. Seeing no other public commentary from John or staff, will close that portion of this case and continue with questions from board members to either the applicant or staff. If anyone has a burning question, we go down the list. Nick, would you like to start?
Sure, thank you. Well, my congratulations to the applicant. This looks like a nice project to have at a very important corner. So from an infill standpoint, I really appreciate that. I don't have an issue with any of the requests. I guess I just have a comment. Maybe it can be addressed with some feedback from the architecture, but it seems to me that the concept of the architecture and the contextualization seem to focus on this little region of our city that is really kind of federalist in architecture, if that's an appropriate term. Roger, you may have to help me, but that whole sort of tying into those columns and those sort of structures seems to me, and again, it's just personal opinion, that it seems to be sort of zeroing in on a particularly dated look, because that whole area or region perhaps was built in the 60s or 70s. That to me seems like an odd design element and contributes, in my opinion, to making the building look a little dated, like it was built in the 70s or kind of is one of these older buildings. It might be that, or it might be the color that's sort of throwing me too. That color just looks a little different or odd. And I just was wondering, was there history there of discussion between staff and architecture? And is there any other comment about what I just mentioned relative to those column structures and the color?
Yeah, it came directly from conversation between Frederick Mittner, the city's historic preservation, and myself as the planner. Between us and the architect, the original design was more modern, and we worked with the applicant that we wanted to. We gave general feedback of that we wanted to tie into the Northwest neighborhood and the district, and do something that's a little more unique. We're getting a lot of modern architecture in the downtown with these new projects. So something that would be unique to this area, and also wanted to have something at the corner feature to focus. So we were concerned that if it was too modern of approach, that it wouldn't have enough of a respect to the surrounding areas and to the Northwest neighborhood. So that was something directly from staff's recommendations.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think from a methodology and a history standpoint is appropriate. I just think maybe the execution of it, and it's all just personal opinion. I don't think we're here to approve these details, but it's just the one thing about this project that's sort of stuck in my craw, and just wanted to pass that comment along.
Certainly. And I mean, it's something we can, colors are easier to modify too. So maybe that's a discussion we can have.
I appreciate it. Yep. And then the only other comment was about the trees. I heard Edwin, you had mentioned preservation or mitigation of the black olive trees, but Angela, maybe going back to the Banyan streetscape design, I couldn't quite recall. I thought oak trees were going along that whole edge and there weren't going to be any preserved black olive trees on that corridor.
Hi, yes, this is Angela Biaggi with WGI. The Banyan Streetscape project is, they are preserving all of the healthy existing black olives in that 2-block stretch where we can. The only place that they're being removed and replaced with live oaks is in front of this project site. And that was determined pretty early on when this project came through and Banyan Streetscape was still in the design process. We were concerned that the construction of this project would be detrimental to those trees and that they would not survive in the long term. So the Banyan Streetscape project is replacing the black olives along this frontage with live oaks. And in addition to that, this project is providing mitigation on site as well.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Okay, thanks, Nick.
Sure.
I was going to say my comments later, but just to follow up, Nick, on yours, and this would be a question for the either Edwin or Jason. And I had somewhat of the same concerns that you mentioned, Nick, and then I figured, well, if they want to go this route, there's certainly precedent there, and I think if it's executed appropriately, it could be successful. But Jason, in your presentation, there was an image of a project you mentioned in Homestead that appeared to be very similar to this. Do you know if anyone today has any additional photographs of that project?
Was that might be the Princeton Park. That is a it's a garden style, kind of a 3-story. It's I wouldn't say it's exactly similar to this, but we do have one that we just started construction on in Fort Lauderdale called Village View. That is similar, and we have some color renderings that are similar to the color renderings we have here. And so we could provide those. I mean, I will say on the architecture, the original proposal we had was more of a modern design, and the architect on the Village View Fort Lauderdale development currently under construction is the same as the architect here. So there was a similar design. However, after meeting with staff, and staff wanted to take into account more of a sort of a neighborhood architectural element, and we did have some discussions on what that might be. And so they did point to the brutalist architect style that is on some of the government buildings. And so we sat back down with the architect, and it did trigger a major redesign. I mean, it was about a 60-day redesign on the whole building. And sort of the challenge was to come back with something like that, but keep it, not looking like it was built in the 70s. So, I think they've done a good job on the architectural design. It does take into account sort of the elements that they've shown there. And we were also in the lobby of the building thinking about putting up kind of that sheet to give some, let the public know kind of where the inspiration of the design came from. But as far as the color, I mean, we're certainly open to changing that. So that's an easy change.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
we can definitely work with staff on that. I mean, the only things I think maybe to reinforce, reinforce the design concepts. This would be directed to the team, Edwin, Jason, the architect. It would be maybe look into the railing design, something that, again, might reinforce some of the motifs that you've introduced versus just the standard vertical pickets that I'm seeing on your renderings. And even quite possibly around the pool deck, instead of that whole run of metal railing, you may consider some portions of some stucco and solid wall rails in conjunction with the picket designs. But again, that's something maybe you could work with staff on that. It would help, again, reinforce that whole general concept of yours. But anyways, that's great. Thank you. How about Brian? You got any comments, Brian?
No comment.
No comment? Okay. Let's see, Steven's not here. Michael?
Just again to reinforce some of the things that I've said, it's just exciting to see investment in the historic Northwest neighborhood. Looks like this project has been a long time coming, and outside of our CRA, I don't think I've seen any significant project break ground since I've been here in 10 years. So that's really exciting to see, and kudos to WGI to move this along. From a walkability standpoint, I'm really excited about that pedestrian walkway that would connect Sapodilla and Tamarind. One question with that is just the width. Is that also going to be suitable for bikes, or is that really strictly for just walking traffic?
The linear park or the pedestrian passageway on the east side?
I think the north side of the project, that's the linear that would go along the rail line. Isn't that the pedestrian walkway that would connect Sapodilla to Tamarind?
Yes.
So what do we call that? That's called the linear.
We don't know yet. It's conceptual, and so that's something we can look at. We haven't really looked into the design too much yet. It's pretty. It's a great design, but the actual hardscape versus landscape and everything hasn't been fully designed yet. So I think that being able to be open for that's a great question. I will have to discuss internally. Maybe Edwin can better answer whether it was just designed for pedestrians or minor bicyclists.
The Banyan Street project, I believe, has the bike lanes on both sides. So, there's going to be, hopefully a lot of people that are going to be biking to the area. I just didn't know if that was going to be suitable or not. But I'm sure
maybe because of the bike lane, maybe it wouldn't be necessary. More of a walking path. That might be the case.
And that's going to come back through doc review, I believe you said. So we'll get to see that later. But I'm just excited to see the project. Hope it moves forward. The Northwest just has such limited connectivity. So all these, the pedestrian connectors to the Northwest, the more the better. I don't have any issues with any of the variances. Again, looks like staff and the developer have done a really great job working together, and would love to see it move forward. That's it.
Great. Thanks, Michael. David Felton, I believe, is not here. Brad, do you have any comments?
I'll echo others' sentiments regarding the project. I think it's a good project. I'm excited about it. No further comments.
All right. Thanks, Brad. Jonna Lee, any comments?
I agree with the project moving forward and have no comments.
Great. Thank you. Gregory, how about you? Any comments?
Yes, I do have a comment. First, I want to say this is a great project. I do like it. But I know some of the items I'm going to comment about is on the variance. I do have some concern with the traffic, especially with the complete street project that's going in the area. I just want to echo that I don't think that just having warning signal may be enough because humans are a habit of creature of habits, and that based on studies that have been done, especially with Vision Zero, most traffic fatality doesn't happen at the intersection because the entrance is not, it's further down to the west side of the building, I believe. It may trigger pedestrian and bicycle fatality. So maybe look into other remedy beside the warning signal. Maybe to slope the sidewalk to kind of reduce the speed for a cyclist or something. The other question I have, multiple recommendation is there, I know there's a proposed park, but maybe sort of create green space on the roof. I don't know if that's gonna be possible because the population that you guys going to cater to would have either teenagers or young people that maybe need space. And let's say this is a downtown area, so maybe this is something to look into, sort of to kind of create additional green space other than the walkway that's being proposed. And my last comment is Tri-Rail is at the right across the street. I didn't see anything mentioned about it, how the project is kind of beneficial, kind of create more pedestrian friendly or access point because of the Tri-Rail being next to the building and sort of kind of create a more friendly, pedestrian friendly access point with Tri-Rail and the development. And the last one is the bike. And I see on the plan there is bicycle, but it should be highlighted more, or maybe it's too early in the development stage. It wasn't talked about, but the bike on the side to kind of promote that walkability aspect again. That's all the comment I have. Maybe staff or the applicant can answer those. Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks. Oh, go ahead, Liz.
Sorry. So I'm going through, there are bicycle racks. There's a requirement for public bicycle racks. So they are proposing those on site. I think Edwin's sharing his screen. Edwin, do you have a site plan on one of your slides?
Yep.
So there will be a micromobility station, which is a requirement for when you have micro units. So this micromobility station, we will be working internally with the city traffic engineers, and it'll be a space that will be for parking electric bikes and scooters once we have that new contract is in place. And they've picked a vendor. I can't remember which one it was, but I know the contract hasn't been completely figured out yet, but by the time this project comes in, it should. So we will have a place for that, which will help for that connection into the Tri-Rail station. And then I don't know if you can see, but they do have public bike racks proposed along the project's northwest corner, and then there's also public bike racks proposed right outside the lobby. So on Banyan. So if you can you zoom in a little bit or not? You have it's PowerPoint.
It's hard to see. Okay.
Okay, yeah. So there's some public bike racks there, and then also at the northwest corner. And that's a requirement. And then there's also a requirement for private bike racks internal to the building. So they have a couple spaces which are shown on the floor plan, but not here. Oh no, they do. So they have a bike storage internal to the parking garage as well. So that's for the use of the actual tenants of the building. In terms of the Tri-Rail connection, I mean, the Banyan Boulevard streetscape repair will definitely help to connect people getting across Tamarin Avenue. But beyond that, beyond what's within their specific project, there's not too much we can do, outside of their particular project and scope, other than they're providing those bike racks and providing the station, and then with the Banyan streetscape design, that crosswalk that's going in as part of the Banyan streetscape design that's shown in this plan, crossing Tamarind and also Banyan Boulevard, are going to be highly visible. I think they are painting them very bright colors, so that should help
with the connection there. In terms of sloping the sidewalk for reducing speed, that would have to come from internal review by the traffic engineers. Something that we can look at, and it's something that I can discuss with the project manager for the Banyan Streetscape design and the applicant, and try to find some other solution of what they, excuse me, as traffic engineers, what they, I'm sure they would share the same concerns you have. So that's something I'll follow up with them on that. I think that, and then I wasn't exactly sure what you meant by creating additional green space for the project.
That was the off the cuff idea. Maybe some type of green space on the roof for open space, if that would be possible, or it's just off the cuff idea, because I don't see enough gathering space for the resident here beside the pool area.
Liz, if I could jump in, I mean, I think with some of our newer board members, we probably need to spend some time with them talking about the requirements of the downtown master plan and how, projects are looking at consistency with that. In this case, they exceed the requirement. Certainly it's something we can talk to the developer about, but it's not required. It's not necessarily consistent with the downtown master plan, but I think we need to spend some time because it's a very complex form-based code that we need to probably discuss with some of our newer board members.
Sure. Yeah, the private open space they're providing for the pool area, if Edwin can show that, that's actually exceeding the requirement that we have. And it's the pool area, and it's going to be landscaped and hardscaped. There's requirements for that, as well as internal community amenities that we don't have control over, but the developer provides. So I know they're providing a gym. And I'm not sure the other elements of gathering spaces they're providing. So I don't know if Jason wants to speak on that.
Sure. Yeah. Off the pool deck, we're providing a club, club/meeting room, as well as a media center space. And then on the first floor, we've got a gym located in the active use space along Banyan Boulevard. And then we have a pretty large lobby area there when you first enter the building, and that's going to have, furniture and seating areas in it as well. So.
Thank you. Plus all the benefits of living in a downtown area as well. Helps, of course.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. My last point is, I believe the TPA had created a bus shelter guideline for Palm Trend, which actually Palm Trend is using. So you guys can refer to that documentation because I know you guys gonna have to remove a bus shelter, but the TPA had created a bus shelter guideline for future shelter and across the county. So that will be a good resource for you guys. Just want to share that.
Definitely. We had been talking with Bomtran about their requirements, but that would definitely be a great beneficial document for us to have for when we have projects that are going to have to replace or install a shelter.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Gregory. Let's see, any other comments? Did we get everybody on the board to comment? Okay, I'll just echo my comments. And again, I think it's a great project. You obviously have put in the team a lot of work with staff as usual and sort of vetted out a lot of the issues that we really don't have to deal with here. So thank you for that, Liz, Anna Maria, and Jason, Edwin. I'll just repeat again my comments, and I know Nick mentioned this. It might not be my personal taste either to sort of follow the brutalist architecture, but since you've done so and staff has worked with you, I commend you on what looks to be a good job doing so. My only comments that I might like to see incorporated, Liz, in the conditions would be for the applicant to work with the staff on coming up with a better railing design on the pickets, possibly looking at incorporating some stucco and rail wall components integrated with a pool deck railing instead of the entire perimeter being in the metal pickets. And again, confirm with staff that there's an appropriate color to really emphasize what I'm assuming is a stucco and concrete frame, Jason, on the main component of the structure. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. And maybe even consider, I don't know if you guys gave any thought to the parapet design up above the terminus of your dominating concrete frame, whether that should have any other type of articulation or precast panels with any type of detail. But again, that's more just some opinion for possible further study from your design team.
Sure, yeah, in fact, I think we did have an iteration where we had something like that and had spoken with the staff and maybe removed it, but we can definitely take a look at putting it back.
Yeah, just a thought. But again, I think given the direction that you've taken, you've done a good job at it. Again, that would be my concern in general. It doesn't become another sort of depressing gray concrete brutalist blob like some of these others where you can see 20 years from now would be my concern how this building weathers and whether it's going to be, again, another eyesore. So hopefully you'll take pride and care in executing the details with your construction and design team, and it'll all work out. So, and I'm really looking forward to that linear park on the north side when we see that. And that would conclude my comments. And unless there's any other discussion, does anyone have a formulation for a motion?
And just a reminder, we'll need separate motions for the DAC special review as well as the variances.
Okay.
And then when you're reading for the special review, if you can just somehow word the condition that you want to include with the railings and color and however you want to word that, just so I have that for the record.
Okay. I mean, I would word it just like I stated, just that I would like staff to be involved with the further review of some railing designs that have a motif to complement the architecture and get away from just the straight vertical pickets. But someone else needs to, I guess, incorporate that into the motion if they wish. Nick, you're pretty good at motions. You want to give it a go?
Sure. Do I need to read anything in particular or just go for it?
Liz, do you want to start with the variance components?
Yeah, however you want to do. If hold on, I can bring up my
It was the exact language in the staff report, right?
I can bring up my presentation again. That'll
Oh, yeah, good.
help with that. So here's for the
Liz, if you go to the staff report, pages 34, 35, 36 are the requested motions of Nick, if you want to look at that in your report, if you have it with you.
Sure. Is that what got put on the screen here? The variances?
It is.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the variances for this project. And number one would be a variance request from ZLDR table 4-46 to reduce the minimum requirement use liner along an avenue from 60% to 21%. Number two, a variance request from ZLDR table 4-46 to reduce the required minimum from 16 to 15 feet along an avenue, Banyan Boulevard. Number three, a variance request from ZLDR table 4-46 to reduce the minimum setback from 5 feet to 0 feet. Number four, a variance request from ZLDR table 4-24 to increase the maximum group podium and tower setback from a primary pedestrian street, Tamarin Avenue, from 30 to 34 feet.
Liz, is that sufficient?
I believe so. Stacy, do they need to reference the section?
Nick, are you making that finding based on those variances meeting the criteria of the city code?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay,
You're
thanks.
welcome.
That motion, is there a second, please?
Second?
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None? Okay, that motion carries. And then next, would someone like separate motion for the special review?
Correct.
I can do it.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the special review for this project. And I move that the Downtown Action Committee approve the special review for DAC case number 20-04 as listed in the staff report dated June 10, 2020. The following conditions are recommended. A, the project shall obtain City Commission approval for the transfer of TDRs associated with the Affordable Housing Initiative. B, prior to issuance of building permit, a legal document must be in place to restrict development on the adjacent 34-foot land. C, in the case that the linear park is not constructed, the applicant shall install a 5-foot landscape barrier landscape buffer along the north facade. A portion of this landscape would be on the CRA/city property, for which a maintenance agreement would be recorded for agreement of maintenance. D, the driveway shall be restricted to right in, right out turning movements only. E, the applicant shall provide a staging area at the curb side of Banyan Boulevard for dumpster and recycling bins. A drop curb may be required subject to further review by city staff. F, the applicant shall continue to work with staff on the proposal for the pedestrian passageway to incorporate a wider variety of landscape and hardscape material and reduce the impact of the trench drain to the pedestrian experience. G, the applicant shall incorporate a warning signal for pedestrians and bicyclists when a vehicle is exiting the driveway to reduce potential impacts between vehicles and pedestrians/bicyclists. H, the applicant shall work with city staff to find an appropriate location for the micro-mobility station. Staff is recommending the placement along Tamarind Avenue for easy access to the public. I, the applicant shall continue to work with city staff and Palmtran to locate an appropriate site and design for the bus shelter that currently exists on site. J, the artificial green wall shall be removed. The motion is based upon a determination that the testimony presented at this hearing, along with the application submitted, constitute a preponderance of competent, substantial evidence. The board hereby makes findings of fact that the special review requested satisfies all of the criteria of the City of West Palm Beach Zoning and Land Development Regulations, Article 2, Section 94-52B2.
And did you want to add the condition that Roger Jansen proposed as well?
I do, with the condition that the railings be investigated for an alternate design and that the top parapet be studied for detail and that the color is negotiated with staff for an appropriate selection.
That sounds good. Okay, thanks, Nick. There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second?
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Okay, great. The motion carries. Thanks, everyone. Be a great project.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on. This will go forward into the next phase of this with a TDR case number 20-01. Request again by Edwin Muller of WGN. If we could hear from the applicant, please.
I was on mute, sorry. The applicant actually contained this information in their last presentation, so I'll just quickly go over this. This is case TDR 2001. I do want to quickly go over TDR program for some of the newer board members. So the TDR program, Transfer of Development Rights Program, the intent of this is to use market forces to pay for the preservation of historic buildings and for the creation of new public open space. So developers can acquire rights that can be used to increase development potential at a more suitable location. The TDR program shall only apply to qualified properties located within the downtown master plan area. A property is deemed qualified if it is designated as an eligible sending site or receiving site on figure 4-35 as shown here, which the subject site is within a receiving district, QBD 3 to 15. So I'm not going to go over this again, but they are proposing to use the affordable housing incentive to increase their height and to increase their FAR. The sending site for this is the city-owned Gateway Park at 1025 Okeechobee Boulevard, pictured here on Okeechobee and Australian Avenue. Currently, the site has 291 square feet of remaining TDRs to transfer. And these are city-owned. They are free for affordable housing incentive, subject to the project meeting all of the requirements of section 943134, which is more regulated by the Housing and Community Development Department and subject to City Commission for final authority. So DAC is reviewing the transfer of the actual numbers of the TDRs, but City Commission has the final authority for the transfer for this incentive in particular. So we went over this table. So the TDRs they're requesting is 56,171 square feet. After this transfer, the Gateway Park would have 439,120 square feet of remaining development rights to transfer. And with that, staff is recommending approval for the transfer of 56,171 square feet from city-owned Gateway Park to the Flagler Station project. And that is it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. It's very clear from the previous and your summary there. Does anyone, any public comment on this case, John?
On this item, no, we have not received anything to my knowledge.
Great, thanks. Sina, any questions from the board on this case?
Nope.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead, Brian.
quick question for staff. What's the status of the city-owned TDR bank with this transfer?
Just from this one, I don't have the entire.
Go back to your slide, Liz. You had
Yeah,
493,000 square feet.
Yeah, I have it for this Gateway, the Gateway Park. I guess this
Right,
is.
I'm asking.
So yeah, so there would be 439,120 square feet left after this transfer.
Okay, yeah, I see it now. Great, thank you.
Sure.
Anyone else? No? Would anyone like to make a motion for this?
Motion to approve.
Okay, motion a second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye opposed? None, motion carries. Thank you. And moving on to the,
Do we have to read it in?
all right, do we need that read in, Stacy?
We generally like for you to make the findings prior to voting, but Liz can confirm if she needs that condition to be made part of the motion.
I'm sorry, Stacy. What was we need the.
Do you need the condition listed on the proposed motion included?
I think so. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't include that on my presentation. For the transfer for city-owned TDRs for City Commission approval. Yes, I think that would need to be in the record.
Okay. Then please go ahead and read the proposed motion.
Yeah, that's what I said. I move that the Downtown Action Committee approve the transfer of development rights, DAC case number TDR 20-01 as listed in the staff report dated June 10th, 2020 as follows. A, the transfer of 56,171 square feet of TDRs from the city-owned Gateway Park at 1025 Okeechobee Boulevard to the Flagler Station project proposed at 951 Banyan Boulevard, along with 4 eastern adjacent parcels pursuant to the requirements of section 94-132 in section 94-134, subject to the following conditions. The proposed development shall obtain city commission authorization for the conveyance of city-owned development rights prior to issuance of a building permit. If the site plan approval expires prior to commencement of construction, the development rights transferred by the city at no cost are forfeited and revert back to the city.
There's a second.
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 Roger, you're still on mute.
Oh, yeah, thanks, sorry. Yep, yeah, all motion second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, thanks, everyone. Great project. We'll move on to the code revision cases, and we'll move forward with staff on this city initiated request, case number 1858.
Where do I have mine?
Mr. Chair, just 1 second while I transfer over
Okay,
Where is
thank
my
you.
video for people. Hold on.
All right, thank you all.
Is that what they're saying? But no, they are not saying this. Please.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I
Anna, are you
believe
sharing
that
screen?
is,
I'm sorry, John?
Mr. Chair, I believe that's everybody. So you'll need to swear, or Stacy will need to swear in speakers for this case.
We don't need to swear in for code revision cases.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Anna Maria.
Yes, I'm trying to share my screen with my presentation now. If you give me 1 second. Can you see my presentation or not? Not?
Not currently.
Not currently. Okay, hold on 1 second.
Is there a green icon on the bottom?
Yeah, but it's like I know the green item, but I see the presentation here in here, but I cannot share it.
Okay, then go back to the video. Yeah, go click on over here. And then
Share.
can you minimize that?
No, this is sharing.
You clicked on Liz's presentation.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
But it's like
You gotta
mine
get
is here. It's here.
Yeah, get close up the no, no.
Sort of this one.
Okay, then go back to the other one. Yeah, escape.
No, share.
And then share. Yeah, and now you can open it.
Where is it? This one is here. Okay, share. I cannot see it. This is not working. Can you see my presentation now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Sorry about that. So we are gonna see today planning board case 1858 and 1858A. It's a city initiated request planning for a text amendment to the downtown master
The
plan.
presentation is not on presentation mode.
Perfect. It's a text amendment to the downtown master plan element of the comprehensive plan, modifying policy 1.1.1 and policy 3.1.3, and planning board case 1858A, a text amendment to chapter 94 L zoning and land development regulations, article 4, section 94.119, Quadrille business district, section 94.128, Northwest neighborhood district, section 94.131, incentive programs, section 94.133, special district incentive, table 4-45, building requirements for Quadrille business district 515, table 4-46, building requirements for Quadrille business district 3 to 15, and figure 4-35, TDR sending and receiving sites, and creating a Table 4-58A building requirements for Northwest District 328 receiving site. The intent of the amendments is to promote the redevelopment of the Rosemary Corridor within the Northwest District and the Banyan Corridor within the Quadrille Business District. We originally advertised a Planning Board Case 1858B. This has been withdrawn by staff as the amendments proposed originally on this case will be included in their Planning Board Case 1858A. In recent years, the city has worked on the redevelopment of the downtown and especially the Northwest neighborhood, implementing different strategies for the redevelopment. Since 2002, in 2002, the Stoll and Lee Company developed the Northwest Neighborhood Strategic Development Plan, and this report guided the redevelopment strategies for the Northwest neighborhood and has been our guiding principle for the last 20 years. Publicly initiated projects are moving forward based on these recommendations initially done in 2002, and projects like the renovation of the Sunset Lounge and the construction of the Heart and Soul Park are moving forward based on that. And based on that, also private interest in the neighborhood has been increasing, and we have a lot of interest in the redevelopment of different areas of the neighborhood, especially the edges of the neighborhood. Considering the impact that the redevelopment of these parcels on the boundaries of the neighborhood will create on the historic neighborhood itself, the city decided to retain the services of the Stoll and Lee Company again to evaluate the current conditions and make recommendations to ensure that the future development of these parcels is adequate for the neighborhood and protects the scale of the historic district. We have with us today Mr. David Lee and Lawrence Bluestone from Stoll and Lee doing the presentation. They're going to join us today in the meeting to do a presentation of their findings for the study that they have conducted. I'm going to transfer now the screen and put up their presentation. Mr. Lee. Are they in? John, do you see them?
Yes, they're there. They just need to unmute.
Okay. Mr. Lee, you are up now.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. As Anna Maria has stated, basically the goal here is as the downtown is expanding to the south and to the east, we're looking to figure out, based on today's guidelines and zoning, ways in which to continue to accommodate this growth and to bring economic development and growth to the Northwest neighborhood, but in ways that are compatible with the historic fabric of the neighborhood. So we've been brought in again, and we've spent the last several months now looking to visualize what the implications are of what can be built under current zoning guidelines, as well as where necessary, looking at situations where we might want to adjust some of those guidelines. Next. The target area is outlined in red there. I hope you can see it reasonably well along Banyan and along Rosemary, those two corridors in particular. And you'll note in the slide on the right that there is an existing historic Northwest neighborhood district. And so in some cases, we nudge into the historic district with these new corridors as well. And so we're looking for ways to make sure we do that in a sensitive manner. Next. Obviously, redevelopment in any area poses both challenges and opportunities, and particularly when you start to talk about the scale of investment that's being contemplated here. On the side of the challenges, obviously a big worry is how we build in a way that doesn't overshadow literally and figuratively the existing neighborhood. New investments generally bring rise in rents, which is always a challenge in terms of longtime residents that want to stay in the area. Although historically, I have found in our work around the country that people are willing to pay more if they feel that a neighborhood is on the upswing. Clearly, there are a number of historic buildings as well as contributing resources, and we want to retain as many of those as possible. And then new development always brings new parking. Most people want new stores and shops and development, but they want less, and they want more parking, but they also want less traffic. That rarely works. In terms of opportunities, though, certainly it creates more patronage for local businesses, creates opportunities for some new businesses, and much of the work has incentives to increase affordable housing in the area. Bringing more people into an area obviously makes the streets livelier. That usually means increased safety. In some of the guidelines, there are regulations that encourage street and park improvements. And we are also looking at the opportunity to create business investment opportunities for residents as they might develop in the area or team up with other developers. Next. The area has a very rich history, and these are just a few shots of it from its earliest incarnation to its heyday in the 40s and 50s, when many of the top African-American entertainers from all around the country came and performed at the nearby Sunset Lounge, right in the heart of the area. Next. As was mentioned, our firm came down and worked way back when in the area. We grew to care for it a great deal, and we're so pleased to know that many of the guidelines were being followed, and really enjoyed the opportunity to come back and work here again. Although I would have liked to have been able to come down once or twice in the wintertime, but that didn't work this time. Next. There have been a number of studies on various levels that have continued to shape and move the neighborhood forward. Next. It is a critical neighborhood in the larger context of the neighborhood. As you can see, it's very near what now is, I guess, Rosemary Square, and of course the Clematis Street side of downtown as well. Next. The neighborhood's kind of a mixed bag. There are some buildings that are clearly in need of investment, and the city's taken a stand there. There are some really quality buildings there with a very distinctive Florida kind of a cast to them. And there are residents there and property owners that plan investments in the area and are looking forward to its continued evolution. And then the rock of the neighborhood, of course, is a series of churches, many of them in quite spectacular structures. Next. As I said, it's kind of a mixed bag. There are some really grand opportunities, which we will talk about in terms of development proposals, but there are also some anchor businesses that have been there a long time and are community owned. Next. This is the historic district. As you can see, it on the Rosemary side, it sort of zooms in and out a little bit, and that's true as it approaches Banyan as well. So as we look to guidelines for both the Rosemary and Banyan corridors, we have to be mindful of how those the things that are being encouraged will interface with the historic district. Next. There are a number of projects, many of which are have been put on the table, and they're in different states. As we saw this morning, the Flagler Street proposal, for example, has moved along. Next. So among the projects that are being proposed, one is this hinge block, which originally was going to actually be a couple of hotels and some housing. They have now scaled back for the moment that investment to just one hotel. Next. This one has been approved, and this is the Banyan Boulevard Residence handsome project. Next. Flagler is now well on its way to final approval. Next. And the Grand is in heavy rotation, as they would say in the music business. as the staff and the developers are working to come up with an agreeable proposal for that site. Next. The city is doing its part, and there are a number of initiatives that are going to be welcomed by the community. At the top of the list is the restoration of the historic Sunset Lounge. Next. And as per our proposals years ago, the idea of a park right in front of the sunset to kind of complement the important cultural center that it represents there. Next. It's also a very innovative set of proposals on the table to really invigorate Rosemary Avenue with the dancing to the sunset concept. Next. We know that Banyan Boulevard is being upgraded to actually resemble a boulevard with the medians and the planting and so forth. And that's a very exciting development because it's going to act more as a seam between the Northwest, the historic Northwest, and the rest of downtown rather than a barrier. Next. The linear park is another public investment that's going to be a real addition to the neighborhood. Next. There are some shotgun housing investment going on in the neighborhood, and these will be really nice and again complementary of the scale of the architecture in the historic district. Next. And in some cases, it's been held up with bubble gum right now, but the city is making an aggressive investment to save some really important structures in the neighborhood. Next. Another large-scale urban design planning move, which we think is really good and further links the historic neighborhood to the downtown, is the expansion of the street grid and creating inviting public pedestrian ways. Next. There are a series of sites that are unlikely to be developed very soon because of some of the environmental remediation challenges there. And then there are also a series of county and federal properties that will go when it makes sense for them to go, but are not under the control of the city itself. Next. Zoning, you guys are certainly familiar, especially after this morning's talk. I know you guys are familiar with all the nuances of zoning. Next. And the various things that are controlled by, height, setbacks, stuff like that. We've been over that this morning, so I don't think we need to talk about that very much. Next. The one thing that is important, of course, is how to take advantage of TDR and other tools to allow for increased development if, in fact, certain qualifications are met, having to do with affordable housing or the provision of open space or other community benefits. Next. As you can see, there are a number of incentive zoning districts throughout the city. And so they're not just limited to the Northwest neighborhood, but if you look at the slide on the right, you can see that there have already been negotiated quite a few incentive districts. So this is continuing with that pattern. Next. So I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Larry Bluestone, who's going to walk you through some of the highlights of the zoning as we understand it to be today, and some suggestions for places where we see some changes, as well as some places where the current guidelines seem to be working quite well. So with that, I'll let Larry start talking.
Okay. Thank you. Next slide, please. So as we began our work, working with Anna Maria and Liz and others, one of our main missions was to step back, take an overall view of what scale new development could occur at under existing zoning conditions, because a lot was clearly going on in the neighborhood, particularly again along Rosemary and Banyan. So we went to the zoning ordinance, and on vacant properties, we started testing out, following all the rules of those zoning ordinances, what could be built. We are asked to visualize this to see if the scale of what could be built is in fact compatible with the existing neighborhood. So we started out looking at what if things were developed just under base zoning, the sort of green bluish color in plan, Rosemary on the right and Banyan to 2nd and 3rd Street running horizontally toward the bottom there. Next. So if you look, these were 3D visualizations of what could be built under existing zoning, assuming no landowner or developer was necessarily taking advantage of some of the incentive zoning TDR sites. And as you know, along Banyan, current maximum heights are 3 stories. It goes down to 2 stories as you get closer to 2nd and 3rd. Only along the east side of Rosemary now, under existing base zoning, can you go as high as 8 stories. You can see this in the upper right image, but it nicely, according to the rule, steps down to 5 stories in height as you meet Rosemary Avenue. So these are just 4 different aerial points of view of what existing zoning looks like. Next. So then we were asked, what would this area look like if all the incentive zoning districts were taken advantage of by developers? Next. So here is the plan of the incentive zones immediately apropos to our area. The 4 brown ones on the right, NWD 3-4, and there are 3 incentive zoning districts along Banyan between Banyan and 2nd. Next. So again, here's the plan. We built out, following the existing incentive zoning rules, what it may look like if developers attempted to develop to the maximum allowed. Next. And so here are 3D visualizations again. As you know, along Banyan, by the rules, you can go up as much as 15 stories. Sometimes you can't achieve getting that high because of the proportions and dimensions of the site or other requirements like setbacks and how much parking is provided. But we tested all that out. There are several ways this could have been visualized, but this is a good image of what could be built under incentive zoning. So along Banyan to 2nd, you'll see that there are quite high buildings that could be built. Along Rosemary, on the west side of Rosemary, you can build 4 stories on Rosemary, and it steps down to 3 stories immediately adjacent to the neighborhood, which is kind of quite compatible with neighborhood scale along Rosemary. Next. So then we just simply put the base zoning and incentive zoning combined to give a maximized picture of, in theory, what could be built under current zoning. Next. Next, please. So again, in plan, the green blue buildings are the existing base zoning, and the yellow is what could be built under incentive zoning if property owners and developers took advantage of that incentive zoning. If you look particularly, well, let's, on the upper right image, for example, you'll see the blue buildings are on the east side of Rosemary, the yellow on the west side. There's a nice scaling down under existing zoning that as buildings meet the neighborhood, although there is quite a lot of development allowed along Rosemary. If you look at the image on the lower left, we're looking now from the northwest, I think you can see along Banyan, those yellow buildings that again can now go up to 15 stories. There appears to be a wall there almost between the rest of the downtown and Banyan and the much lower scaled residential neighborhood. You can also sort of see this, what we call a wall on the lower right image as it meets the existing neighborhood. Next. So this is just a comparative case. On the left is maximizing development under base zoning, and on the right is maximizing development taking advantage of the incentive districts as well. So you can see what can be built on the left under base zoning, and on the right, a maximized picture with the incentive districts used. And again, if you look at the lower right, at least what appears to be to us on Banyan is sort of a wall. Okay, next. So what lessons have we learned? Next. Again, just a picture of the base zoning, what could be built out. Next. So the lessons learned was that under base zoning, the scale of what could be built is largely compatible with the existing neighborhood. There are no real scale conflicts. On the east side of Rosemary, you can go up to 8 stories, but again, the current rules allow it to step down to 5 stories or require it to step down to 5 stories along Rosemary. So the scale remains relatively compatible with the neighborhood to the west side of Rosemary. Now on number 3, the west side of Rosemary, south of 3rd Street and Banyan, sometimes the existing rules there, again on Banyan, you only can go 3 stories, and on 3rd Street only to 2. It may not actually be sufficient in scale under base zoning to really encourage a lot of new development. Next. So, lessons learned. Now we're looking at the maximum build out of what could be built. This image we showed you before. Next. So the lessons learned here is that the existing districts along Banyan, which allow heights up to 15 stories, if they were to occur, really can, we think, overwhelm the scale of the existing 1, 2, even sometimes 3 stories in the existing neighborhood. And we think it creates a wall. So we think that 15-story allowed height should be lowered. On the west side of Rosemary, the existing incentive district there, the NWD 3 through 4, because it steps down from 4 stories on Rosemary down to 3 stories as it immediately adjoins the neighborhood, actually works quite well in terms of scale compatibility. Next. So here are some new recommendations we were suggesting to the staff. Next. So in summary, our whole purpose is to come up with new zoning that scales down or steps down in heights from the major corridors like Rosemary and Banyan and goes to much lower heights as you immediately adjoin the existing historic neighborhood down to 3 to 5 stories. However, these incentive zones must allow enough square footage to incite development to occur to help support the revitalization of Banyan and Rosemary. And we think that balance is getting there, and we have some suggestions. Parking structures, we've seen that in some new proposals, sort of freestanding parking structures adjacent to new buildings are there. We think it's very important that they be architecturally masked and disguised and brought into the fabric of the streets on which they adjoin. And active uses, we are definitely encouraging, particularly along Rosemary and Banyan, commercial uses. As a matter of fact, we're discouraging ground floor residential active uses along Rosemary and Banyan because they are being revitalized as more active street corridors. Next. So these are the 4 incentive districts that are now there or are being proposed. NWD 3 through 4 on the west side of Rosemary, it steps down from 4 stories to 3 stories as it adjoins the neighborhood. This is an existing incentive zone, and we think it works very well as it is now crafted. There is now a new incentive district that we are suggesting being added, and that's the NWD 3 through 8. It is the block between 2nd, 3rd, Sapodilla, and Rosemary. And this is the block on which the hinge block, I just went blank on the name. The Grand is being proposed. And as you'll see in a minute, we're suggesting enough scale and height there to allow what needs to be done, but very protective and stepping down to 3 stories as it adjoins the residential neighborhoods on both 3rd Street and Sapodilla. Along Banyan, we're recommending some changes to the incentive districts there. To the left, we are calling it QBD 5 through 10. So we are taking the maximum floors down from 15 stories to 10. And then from the rail right of way to 2nd Street, we are saying that that should be no taller than 5 stories as it meets the existing fabric of the neighborhood. And then at the corner of Rosemary and Banyan, we have a new district, QBD 8 through 10. It is a little higher. It again is 10 stories only on Banyan, but instead of stepping down to just 5, we're saying it can step down to 8. This is an important nexus corner. It sort of really is the corner that connects the downtown, certainly to the east, with the Northwest neighborhood. Next. So here is a 3D visualization of what we are now proposing. And along Banyan, you can see there is still a lot of height. It's no more than 10 stories, but then along 2nd Street, it steps down to 5 as it adjoins the existing neighborhood. As you look at the corner of Rosemary and Banyan, you'll see again 10 stories along Banyan stepping down to 8. And then in that block between 2nd and 3rd Street where the hinge block is being proposed, in this view, you see the 8 stories, but again, as you hit 3rd Street and Sapodilla, we're stepping it down to 3. And then further up along Rosemary, again, the existing incentive district seems to us to be nicely scaled as it is. Next. This is a view from the opposite direction. Again, if you look now towards Banyan, again, you can rise to 10 stories in Banyan, but we've definitely stepped it down to only 5 stories along 2nd Street, which we think can be compatible with the existing neighborhood. You can see the hinge block there. And then this view, this is between 2nd, 3rd, Sapodilla, and Rosemary. And even though 8 stories are allowed on that block in a garage, when you get to 3rd Street and Sapodilla, it steps down to 3 stories. So this is all in our general principle, stepping down heights as you meet the edges of the existing neighborhood. Next. Again, this is just another view. We're standing here looking over the shoulder in blue, that blue building, that's 550 Banyan Residences. We're at the corner of Rosemary and Sapodilla. This is just a different view of our recommended incentive districts. Next. And this is a view more closely focused in on the hinge block. We're looking really, in front of us is 3rd Street. On the right, the street going off to the upper right is Sapodilla. And again, you can see 8 stories allowed, but it definitely has to step down to 3 stories, both on 3rd and Sapodilla to meet the existing fabric of the neighborhood. Next. So just to give you another view of this, we cut through 3 cross sections through these incentive districts. A at the top is through Rosemary. Then if you see along Banyan, we will show you section B and section C. Next. So here is a cross section. Rosemary is in the middle. To the right in blue is the existing base zoning district, which allows up to 8 stories, but must step down to 5. And then the incentive district, NWD 3 through 4, on the left side of Rosemary allows 4 stories on Rosemary, but steps down to 3 stories. And then you see in gray there, pitched roof house of what exists there now. So we're again scaling down as we meet the neighborhood. Next. Section B. This is through what we're proposing to revise the QBD 5 through 10 district. Banyan Street is on the right. In the middle between those 2 yellow blocks of buildings is the new linear park and on the left is Second Street. So again, we're showing only up to 10 stories now in Banyan and scaling down in this district only 5 stories as it meets Second Street to meet the scale of the existing neighborhood, which is to the left. Next. And then in this cross section, this is QBD 8 through 10 at the corner of Rosemary and Banyan. We're again Banyan is on the right. In this case, Second Street is in the middle, and we've taken it all the way to Third Street on the left. So we're including 2 blocks here. So in the first block, 10 stories on Banyan down to 8 on Second. And then on the Hinge block, we're allowing 8 stories, but again, stepping down to 3 as it meets Third Street in the existing neighborhood. Next. So this is an eye-level view, of course. We're looking here, we're standing at the corner of Rosemary. We're looking west on Third Street, and you see a build-out version of the Hinge block to your left. So again, you see the 8 stories that can be there on the Hinge block, including 8 stories on Rosemary. But by the time it gets to Third, it steps down. So if you look down Third Street, you see only 3-story buildings, and the building there on the corner is what could probably, that parcel is now vacant. It is what probably could be built in scale there now. It's not currently owned by the developer of the Hinge block. Next. This is a different view of the Hinge block. I think you can see Sapodilla is on the right, Third Street is on the left. And again, as you look down both streets, the edges of this new Hinge block can only rise to 3 stories. So again, we think we're keeping in scale with what adjoins under the traditional historic neighborhood. Next. So this, we don't have to go into this, but the community wanted to know what some of the incentive programs are for both upgrading businesses, for encouraging affordable housing. And these are some that the city now has on the books that are available to use. So I think that's it. I think the next slide is questions, which we look forward to hear. Oh, yes, okay.
Thanks, Larry.
So Anna Maria, whatever, we
Back
are
to you.
prepared to answer. Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I have the second part of the presentation will be the specific changes that are proposed for the code. I don't know if you prefer the board to have, if they have any questions at this point for the consultant, or you want to finish the entire presentation and then go over questions for the entire.
My preference would be to continue unless anyone has a specific question right now.
I agree.
Okay, good. Go ahead, Anna Maria. Thank you.
What is that? Yeah, you're on the right one.
Yeah, this one. Okay, so I'm gonna continue now from this. Thank you very much, Mr. Lee and Mr. Bluestone, for your presentation. They have been working very hard on studying all the possibility of the possible scenarios in the Northwest to trying to find out what is the best outcome for the future development. So based on that, staff has put together a series of recommendations proposing amendments to the zoning comprehensive plan and also the zoning and land development regulations to accommodate the recommendations made by the only update report. The recommendations for the comprehensive plan are into specific policies. The policy 1.1.1 is a minor change on the language for the Northwest District to just mention the Northwest Neighborhood Strategic Development Plan update that was just prepared by only. And then the other changes are in policy 3.1.3 and includes just some language to clarify the way the table and the figures describe the information, and update also the maximum development capacity table and the incentive areas figures to reflect the desired changes that are going to be on the zoning code. This, of course, I don't intend you to read this table, but this is the table DMP1 that is included on the comprehensive plan that details the maximum development capacity for each of the sub-districts in the downtown, as a base, and also how much is allowed in terms of FAR for the incentive, and the same for height, the base, and an incentive. So in this table, we have to update the maximum allowed for each of those subdistricts to reflect the new changes on the incentive areas that are proposed by the SOLE. In the same way, the DMP figure 3 incentive areas have to be updated in the comprehensive plan to reflect the new names for the two districts along Banyan Boulevard and the new district created as NWD3. In terms of the zoning and land development regulations, the changes basically will reflect the detail of the recommendations to implement the new incentives and the modifications for the incentives. So there are basically three main changes. The first one is revised incentives provided for the QBD3 and the QBD5. The second one is the proposed new language for the new incentive district called Northwest District 3 to 8. And the third one is introduce some language to allow pedestrian passageways as a connection for required future right-of-way as indicated in the figure 4 of the zoning atlas. So in terms of the first amendments, revised incentives along Banyan Boulevard, there are two main changes in here. The frontage along Banyan on the north side of Banyan are divided into blocks. It's the Quadro Business District 3, that is the block between Tamarind Avenue, Sabdilla, Banyan Boulevard, and 2nd Street. In that district, that is QBD3, the maximum FAR allowed by right is 1, and the maximum height allowed by right is 3. So the proposed, the existing incentive right now allows, called QBD 3 to 15, allows, as it was described by Mr. Lee and Lauren and Bluestone before, a maximum FAR of 3.75 and a maximum height of 15 stories. So based on the recommendations by Solon Lee, we are proposing an amendment to this incentive, and we are calling this new incentive, this block will be called, instead of QBD 3 to 15, it will be called QBD 5 to 10, and we'll have modifications in terms of the FAR allowed and the height. So one of the changes that we are proposing is to reduce the height from the 15 stories maximum allowed to 10 along Banyan Boulevard, and also restrict it even further along 2nd Street. So if you see, we have, instead of before, we have the previous incentive program basically allow 15 stories in the entire subdistrict or entire incentive block, with some setbacks prescribed for 2nd Street. In this case, we have specifically tailored the setback, the FAR and the height according with the frontage of the street. So on 2nd Street, the FAR is lower, is reduced to 2.75, and the maximum height will be 5, more compatible with the north side of the street and the historic district. And along Banyan Boulevard, the FAR will be higher than the previous incentive, will be 4. The maximum height is 10 stories. I put together these to illustrate it a little bit. You saw this image in the presentation done by Sol Lee. And then in here, you see they are proposing the 10 stories along Banyan Boulevard. Then you have you see the linear park in the center, and then the 5 stories along 2nd Street. Just to give you an illustration of the changes, I put in there an outline on red of what is currently allowed by the code. So that you see the height of the 10 stories was provided along the entire width of the block, with just a setback of 62 feet on 2nd Street above the 5th story. So the setback was in here, and then they could build, if desire, a 15-story building. So the massing of the building was substantial, and that's why it was determined by the study that it was too imposing to the neighborhood. So this is the origin of the desire to reduce the height. So the outline in red again is what it was allowed by the code. The section on the background is what is proposed under the regulations under review today. In a similar way, we are proposing amendments to the block between Sabadell and Rosemary, Banyan, and 2nd Street that is currently split in 2 different districts, Quadro Business District 3 and Quadro Business District 5. In this, the 3, as I mentioned before, allows a maximum height of 3 stories and an FAR of 1 under the base zoning, and the QBD5 allows a maximum height of 5 stories and an FAR of 2.75. The current incentive, similar to the other block, allows any proposed new development in this block that purchase TDRs to go to 15 stories with an FAR of 3.75. The proposal under this block is to modify again this and tailor better to match and be more compatible with the neighborhood. In this case, this block will be consolidated under one single incentive that will be called Quadrille Business District 8 to 10. And it has, again, as regulations that is split the block in half. For the properties facing 2nd Street, the maximum FAR allowed with incentive will be 3.75 and a maximum height of 8 stories. For the properties facing Banyan Boulevard, the maximum FAR will be 4.5 and the maximum height will be 10 stories. Did the same exercise in here. This is the section that you saw before. Banyan is located on the right, and you see the section with the 10 stories proposed by the regulation, with the 8 stories stepping down to 2nd Street. With the current regulations, the 15 stories were allowed in here, and this is a similar configuration with it included, the existing regulations include a setback on 2nd Street of, again, 62 feet to allow for a step down. The proposed regulations basically lower substantially the overall height and allow slightly higher along 2nd Street, but the overall height is lower. These are just the 2 tables that were introduced. So we are removing the existing tables for QBD 3 to 10 and QBD 5 to 10 and replacing for the new districts or incentives that are QBD 5 to 10 and QBD 8 to 10. These tables, as you know, include all the details, not only for the FAR and the height for the parcels on that subdistrict, but also includes setbacks. It includes maximum building footprints. It includes private open space requirements or public open space if it is applicable, and different regulations that are similar to those prescribed for each of the districts and incentives in the downtown. The second amendments proposed are new. The new incentive district at for the block located between Rosemary Avenue and 3rd Street, 2nd Street, and Sapodilla Avenue. This block is currently zoned under 2 different zoning designations. There's a portion along 3rd Street that is under the NWDRC1, that's basically the single family district that comprises the majority of the historic district, and it has an FAR of 0.65 maximum with different benefits that are provided by historic designation, and a maximum height of 32 feet. The south portion of the block is designated as NWD2, with a maximum FAR of 1 and a maximum of 2 stories. And the east portion of this block that is along Rosemary Avenue is designated as NWD5 with a maximum FAR of 2.75 and a height of 5 stories. I mentioned this block is currently not subject to any incentive, so it's not allowed to take advantage of any TDRs incentives that increase the height or the FAR. So what we are proposing is to create a new incentive district for this block and allow a maximum FAR of 2.75 with a different height. The maximum height permitted along 3rd Street and Sapodilla Avenue, which are both residential streets, will be 3 stories. And the maximum height allowed for Rosemary Avenue and 2nd Street will be 8 stories. This difference in height will be regulated through different setbacks variations for the block. And this is an example of what you just saw. On the right-hand side is 2nd Street. On the left-hand side is 3rd Street, and how right now this is the proposal to allow the 8 stories along 2nd Street with a step down to the 3 stories along 3rd Street to basically be compatible with the historic nature or the historic scale of the neighborhood. Just to give you an idea, this is what is currently allowed along 3rd Street and 2nd Street, and there were 5 stories allowed on Rosemary. It's a big difference in the scale. One thing that we are introducing for this particular new incentive is we are linking this particular incentive, NWD 328, to a Northwest Neighborhood Workforce Housing Incentive. That means that anyone that desires to take advantage of the incentives for this block will have to provide workforce housing and a project with workforce housing. The requirements that we are included require to provide at least 33% of the total units to tenants with income up to 100% of the area median income, and an additional 10% of the total units to tenants with income between 101% and 120% of the area median income. I included in here a table that lists the prices of the units based on the 2020 area median income as published by the county. And you can see in here that when you compare with the market rates that we gathered a couple of weeks ago from 3 of the residential buildings in the downtown, there are some of the units that are like, will be able to, even the market rate will be below what it is classifying this. So what these tell us is that in some cases, due to the location of this project, probably the units will be below the AMI prescribed under the incentive. But in any case, as things improve in the neighborhood and the rents go higher, they could not increase the percentages prescribed by the incentive program. The incentive program will be tied to affordability controls to development agreements, and they have certain requirements that they have to meet. The workforce housing units shall remain as workforce housing units for those income levels for 15 years after the final CO is obtained for the project. The units shall match also standard finishes for the market rate units. They cannot be segregated or clustered in a particular location, and they have also they should match the unit mix of the market rate. So it's not that they can provide all the units as the studios or one bedrooms. They have to match the unit mix provided for the market rate. In exchange for the workforce housing units, the city will offer all the TDRs needed for the project at no cost. The last amendment is a minor amendment that you already heard this morning, the reference to the pedestrian passageway that is proposed for the extension of Douglas. So we are just introducing in the code language that allows the city the flexibility to designate those future right-of-ways that are indicated on figure 4 of the street classification as a passageways if that is considered appropriate. In this case, staff determined that in the case of Douglas Avenue, it was appropriate to have a passageway instead of a full vehicular use street. So we're moving ahead with that one. And of course, this is conditional to final approval, but we think it will be a beneficial change for the city to have that flexible, modify full streets to passageways for those future right-of-ways indicated on figure 4. Based on all these, the staff recommends approval for Planning Board case number 1858, based on the findings that the amendment meets the requirements of Chapter 163 Florida statutes and is consistent with all the elements of the comprehensive plan. Staff also recommends approval for Planning Board case 1858A, based on the finding that the proposed amendment complies with all the amendments standards found in Section 9432 of the Zoning and Land Development Regulations. The proposed amendments will be presented to the Planning Board on June 16 and to the City Commission on July 16. The amendments will have to go to the state for review and will be sent after the City Commission approval. That concludes the staff presentation, and we are open for questions.
Thank you, Ana Maria. Very thorough. Does anyone have any questions now for staff, or do we have to yeah, let's go ahead and take, actually, let's check and see if there's any comments from anyone in the public.
Yes,
John.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I have a letter from Mr. Harvey Oyer from Shetson Bowen. I urge your support of the 3 above referenced city-initiated requests for DMP amendments. Your proposed amendments are the result of many months of hard work by staff, outside consultants, neighborhood stakeholders, and my client, Affiliated Development. Affiliated Development is proposing the single largest private investment in the history of the Northwest neighborhood, which will only be possible with the enactment of these proposed amendments. During the last decade, almost all parts of our city have experienced dramatic and positive investment and growth. However, the historic Northwest neighborhood has not been a participant in this recent investment and growth. Despite its rich history and great proximity to the downtown, private investment has bypassed this neighborhood for the half-century since integration. Affiliated Development's proposed project will dramatically and positively reinfuse vitality into this important neighborhood. We are all excited and look forward to the second and third order benefits that will inure to the neighborhood as a result of this visionary project. This project and the others that will undoubtedly follow are only possible with the enactment of the amendments before you today. I ask that you favorably consider the staff's requested amendments to the downtown master plan. And that is the end of his comment.
Okay, thanks, Hope. Are there any others? Any other public?
Yeah. Mr. Chair, this is John. In the flag art gallery, we have a few people from the public, so they will be coming to the podium to speak.
Okay, thanks.
Go ahead.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Shalonda Warren. I am the president of Warren Cook and Associates. I have a consulting company that is housed out of 3rd and Rosemary at Cityside Suites. And I have participated in working with affiliated to do some truly grassroots approaches to meet stakeholders and citizens and organizations and businesses throughout the community and the surrounding areas. Our strategy included small, intimate meetings that allowed open dialogue as well as attendance at many large community events. We had the opportunity to meet with the Westward Businesses, the Westward Northwood Association, the Westward Neighborhood Association, Roosevelt Alumni Association, Freshwater Lakes Homeowners Association, the Police Athletic League, Salvation Army, NCCI. We also met with the Progressive Northwest Business Association, Downtown Merchants Association. We've held meetings at Cafe Suites in Northwood Village, and we also had meetings at Cityside Suites. Those meetings were all an effort to meet with the stakeholders and allow them the opportunity to hear specific information about projects about the project that's going on, the Grand, and to allow them to have the opportunity to speak with people that they wouldn't typically have an opportunity to speak with in very large forums. So I'm very happy to report that the people that we've had an opportunity to speak with, the business owners, are the majority of them are in favor of the economic empowerment and the opportunity to reach a greater audience that this project brings to the neighborhood. So I stand in support of your approval of changing the zoning for the Northwest neighborhood to allow greater height and more density so that we'd be able to bring in the businesses and the residents that can enhance the neighborhood's growth. And we recognize that this neighborhood has historically been left out of these opportunities, and this absolutely brings it right front and center. So, again, Shalonda Warren with Warren Cook and Associates.
Thanks, Shalonda.
Sure, we have 3 more people.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is Darren Studstill. I am of 3rd and Rosemary Cityside Suites, and I strongly approve and recommend the recommendations of this morning with the Stolen Lee report and also Ms. Aponte. We're very excited about the growth of the Northwest neighborhood and the opportunities. We would like to encourage more dialogue on the incentives of the neighborhood, but we strongly approve and recommend approval of these incentives that's coming before you. Thank you for your time.
Hello, my name is Jeff Burns. I'm the CEO of Affiliated Development and owner of the property at 309 North Rosemary Avenue. I just, you know, obviously we're strongly in support. We spend a great deal of time working with Anna Maria and staff in order to make sure that we put forth an appropriate project that takes the neighborhood into account and the surrounding residents. You know, this whole thing for us started back in May of 2019 from that period of time up until December, we conducted over 100 meetings with various residents and stakeholders within the community. And subsequently, the project that we have been working on the block that borders Rosemary, Sapodilla, the second and third, came from a great deal of feedback and dialogue, over numerous meetings that occurred. So I'd like to thank you for your consideration and approval of these regulations. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, actually, that's going to be everybody.
Oh, is that okay? Thanks, John. Yep, that's great. Thank you. Then we'll close the public discussion portion of this case and take any questions from the board members for staff. Anyone?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
quick question for Anna Maria. Anna Maria, just in terms of the NWD 3 to 8, which is between second and third at Rosemary, was the intent of that to get sort of fill the hole in the donut in terms of the increased development availability to the north and not really having a lot of critical space in the QBD district, the 8 to 10 district, right at the corner of Banyan and Rosemary? It seems like it was the intent to get more critical mass in that area. It's an important intersection, and obviously the more build out around that corner, maybe that'll incentivize more people to come and look to invest there. Was that the intent of it?
Well, the connection of the Northwest neighborhood with the downtown has always been a focus of the regulation, trying to make Rosemary Avenue something attractive to make the connection with Clematis Street and further down to the south to Rosemary Square. So Rosemary has always been seen as a fundamental corridor for the redevelopment of the downtown and the Northwest in particular. The regulations have always put a lot of effort on what happens on Rosemary. And if you see, even the existing regulations allow additional height on Rosemary. It's 5 stories, or the 15 on the corner of Banyan and Rosemary. What we did with this amendment is tailor the development capacity of those blocks a little bit further to reduce a little bit of the height that was originally proposed to make it more compatible with the neighborhood. And in other cases, like the NWD 328, was to actually increase the development capacity to make the redevelopment of those vacant sites viable. Because what is happening is the current regulation, it's so low, their development capacity, that does not really encourage anyone to assemble the land and make any project. It's not viable in terms of the construction of a building. So the proposed changes will kind of balance that in terms of how the new development is compatible with the neighborhood and respects the scale of the neighborhood, but at the same time allows enough development capacity and height to promote the redevelopment that is needed for those vacant sites.
Thank you. I just gonna tell you, the centers and cores of plans are easy. It's the edges that are always the tough part. And I think you guys did a good job at balancing that. And I think this lays out properly, and it puts the height and sort of the step downs very sensitively back into the neighborhood. And I think it's a good plan. I think it's a good strategy.
Thanks, Brian. Anyone else? Nope, seeing no comments or questions from anyone. Yeah, I agree. It's very thorough, very well thought out, addresses a lot of important critical issues. So I would be in full support of this. Does anyone like to make a motion? Do we have to do these as separate 3 or all in one, Anna Maria?
I prefer if you can do the 2 motions separate, please.
Motion to approve?
Yeah. Stacey, do we need to read something into this?
Can I ask, Mr. Chair, if you have your staff reports, it's on page 12 of the report.
Do you want to read it in, Rick?
Yeah,
Yes,
please.
please.
There you go.
I move that the Downtown Action Committee recommend approval for a PB case number 1858 based on the findings and data analysis presented in the staff report. and based on the findings that the amendment meets the requirements of Chapter 163 Florida statutes, and it is consistent with other elements of the city's comprehensive plan. PB case number 1858A. This motion is based upon the factual testimony presented, the staff report, and the findings that the proposed amendment complies with all of the amendment standards found in section 94-32 of the zoning and land development regulations.
Okay. As the motion, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? None, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, the motion carries. And Anna
Thank
Maria, I
you.
guess that completes it, right?
That concludes it. Yes, that was the last case for today.
Good, perfect. Well, thank you very much. That was very good. Do we have any other business or new business that any board members would like to bring up before we adjourn? Anything else from the staff? Oh, go ahead, Brian.
Quick question. Maybe this is for Rick and Anna Marie, and Rick, probably more for you. What's the status of 1 West Palm and its current situation?
1 West Palm is the Jeff Green project, 2 towers, 30 stories. He called me approximately a month ago to inquire about converting the 2 towers to strictly residential. If the board may remember, back in 2015, we did a code amendment which allowed the district to go from 10 stories to 25 stories if a developer did either 200,000 square feet of Class A office building or 200 full-service hotel rooms. If you did both, then you could increase the height even further from 25 to 30. So at the time, I told him we could not support that. We had a mayor commission workshop where we presented, I did a 20-slide PowerPoint to the commission, and the directive was not to allow it to do purely residential. He has submitted a text amendment to do a code change, which is in our hands right now, and Ann and I are discussing. And he has approached the mayor about possibly doing something else as a concession to the city, maybe doing workforce. So those discussions are still ongoing. Just yesterday, I called Mr. Green's representative, John Schmidt, left him a message to see what his latest is. So we're kind of in that limbo period right now and seeing what how we're going to proceed. We may, either way, they've submitted a code amendment. So part of my reaching out to John yesterday was to find out if he wants to move forward with that code amendment. If so, the DAC will be seeing that probably in the next month or two. If there's an alternative suggestion or proposal he wants to make to the city, then they need to present that to us, and then we'll certainly consider it. So to answer your question, we have an application for a code change. We're having discussions now, so we'll see where it goes from there.
Thank you, Rick.
Anna, anything you want to add to that, or?
Okay. Anyone else have any items they'd like to discuss before we adjourn today?
Just a quick question on the is it the 300 block of Clematis streetscape project, when the construction should be wrapped on that?
400.
The 400. I know, I can tell you they started ahead of time. They were supposed to start at the end of May, and they started at the beginning of April. So I think they expect to finish by August. I think.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, that would be nice. Okay, great. Anyone else? All right, seeing none, thanks to everyone for making time to be here, and thanks to staff again for all your hard work. And we will adjourn today's meeting. See you next month.
Thank you, everybody.